stay tuned because for the next 60 minutes, Motorsports Unlimited is on the air. Hi, I'm Jerry Bryant, and these are the lovely ladies of motorsports. And all this hour, we're going to have 60 minutes of action-packed excitement. All kinds of exciting things will happen. And we got the famous Bill Wildt, and we got all kinds of other good stuff that's happening all this hour. Motorsports Unlimited, 60 minutes of non-stop action. So let's go to the studio right now, huh?
Thanks, Jerry, and hi, everybody. Welcome to the studio headquarters of Chicagoland's most watched, most talked about Access Television series. I'm Samantha Bentley, and this is the 1067th edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Today, we're going to bring you the long-promised show about the invention Bill was inspired to create when he spotted something of interest to him while walking through the J.C. Whitney warehouse in LaSalle, Illinois. You remember, it was almost a year ago, and we've mentioned it several times since then. It's something Bill was pretty excited about and wanted to get going on it right away. But his back problems, including back surgery, slowed him considerably. He's feeling better now, and it's time to reveal what he has in mind. What's that? You don't know what I'm talking about? Well, let's turn the clock back to the spring edition of the 2007 J.C. Whitney Car Show and run the piece we taped that day, teasing you about an idea Bill had.
All right, folks, I told you some places I should never go, and J.C. Whitney is one of them because I always end up finding something that I just got to have. Well, this was a shock to me. This might not mean anything to anybody else, but take a look at what I found. Bikers are going to know what this is kind of right off the bat. This is a little project I'm working on now that is for those that like to go motorcycle touring. This is fantastic. I'm not going to tell you anything more about it right now because, quite frankly, I know all the big shots from J.C. Whitney are going to be watching this show because this is their car show, and I want to do this on a separate thing because this is going to be really good for those of us that are motorcycle touring guys. You'll see. This is cool.
We re-aired that piece in the later show to remind you we hadn't forgotten. Hi, I'm Janine Lauschat, and as I recall, in addition to re-airing the piece, I also mentioned the part Bill was excited about wasn't the trunk, but rather this piece. Of course, I read everything from the teleprompter, so I really wasn't sure what the part was that had Bill so enthused. Well, today we're going to find out all about it. But first, we're going back to the beginning of the story to learn why his discovery was important. Oh, one more thing. For you car guys out there who are thinking about switching to another channel because the subject matter of today's show is bikes, don't do it. Bill says the more involved he got in this project, the more he realized how useful it will be for all kinds of vehicles. So don't go anywhere. You just might find this bike project will have value to you too. Now, where was I? Oh, the beginning of the story. Bill?
I suppose the story started here. Several years ago, our regular viewers are going to remember, I acquired this motorcycle. I was 61 years old at the time, so I'm 64 now. Well, do the math. Several years ago, I acquired this motorcycle and sort of rediscovered motorcycling. We've been all through this on Motorsports Unlimited before. I don't want to detail the whole thing again, but I'd been away from motorcycling for a while. I raced motorcycles all my life. I had motorcycles all my life, and got too old and too injured and just sort of got away from it for a while. As time went by, I stumbled across a bike that reminded me of a bike that I had when I was young, and it re-inspired me to get involved with motorcycling, but I certainly realized I was too old to race and just kind of wanted it for a toy. And after I started using it, realized how reliable it was and how motorcycling had changed and all that, decided to take a road trip, and I discovered motorcycle touring. And what a joy motorcycle touring has turned out to be. I've really gotten into it, and I understand now what the allure of it is and all that. So if you'll recall, one of the things we did with this motorcycle was when I first got involved with this, one of the things that we did, we went through a whole procedure of how you outfit a motorcycle for touring. This one didn't have saddlebags, it didn't have a windshield, it didn't have any of this stuff. And we went through the whole procedure of the windshield, the saddlebags, the tail pack, and of course I had a tank bag and all that, and what the purpose of each thing was. And the idea was to have the audience kind of learn along with me as I learned how to go motorcycle touring. Well, one of the things when I first got the bike and decided I wanted to try touring, one of the things that occurred to me was I'd get myself some hard bags like I was quite used to seeing, like Goldwings, Honda Goldwings, and a lot of the big touring bikes that you see. And lo and behold, I soon found out that, number one, people don't make anything like that for a 1982 motorcycle. Number two, beyond not making anything like that, there were a couple of custom companies that would do it for several $1,000s, and for a motorcycle I had no money in. That was out of the question. And then I heard of a company called Giva in Italy that made hard bags for something called naked touring, but also very, very expensive. So I found out what the soft bag thing was all about. And again, we've been through all this before. I ended up with the Nelson Rig soft bags here because these are the largest soft bags that I could find anywhere. I've been really happy with them. I've detailed it before, exactly how cleverly they're designed and all that sort of thing. And Covermaster, I believe it is. In fact, I better check because I'm going to say the wrong thing. Covercraft, I'm sorry, Covercraft tail pack and tank bag. And all of that stuff has really worked out very, very well. And it was an absolute joy taking the trip, the road trip to upstate New York. And once again, as I said before, fell in love with motorcycle touring. It has been a real joy, but it kept rolling around in my mind about the hard bags. As much as I like the soft bags, and they've got many advantages, not the least of which is that you can stretch the heck out of them. You can force lots of stuff in them that I don't think you can force into a hard bag. On the other hand, the hard bags are kind of slicker looking. They're easier to keep clean and all the rest. But anyhow, had it in my mind that it would be kind of cool to have hard bags, but wasn't really possible. But the idea stayed in my mind.
Bill enjoyed motorcycle touring so much he decided he wanted to get a bigger bike. Hi, I'm May Chin. Let's listen to Janine as she reads an account Bill wrote about how he acquired his Suzuki GSX1100G.
One of the things I learned on my trip to New York was how dramatically motorcycles had changed. Sure, they still had two wheels and an engine in between, but I was astonished at the performance and reliability. Many years ago, working on your motorcycle was part and parcel of the motorcycling experience. Very few people who weren't mechanical ever got into motorcycles, except for the very expensive and somewhat low-tech BMW. They all leaked oil profusely and literally vibrated themselves to death. Back then, we really didn't care. It was part of the manly pursuit of motorcycles. Few people could stand the constant maintenance and serious shaking that riding required. We were tough and we knew it. Others would look at bikers and whisper quietly about how crazy we must be, never said aloud lest we be offended and rain terror upon them. We reveled in that reputation, and it pleased us to be considered among the wild bunch. Of course, I was aware that motorcycles had changed. The Japanese had developed sensational, high-tech, brutally powerful, but absolutely reliable machines. The BMWs of the past were reliable, albeit slow and underpowered. That was an unacceptable compromise for us bikers at the time. We were bad, and we wanted badass machines to underscore our place in society. I knew the Japanese had revolutionized motorcycling, but I really hadn't experienced it myself. I started racing motorcycles at an early age and didn't pay much attention to street riding. As a matter of fact, a brief excursion into street riding, a road trip that failed miserably, in my early 20s reinforced my view of motorcycles being cool, but not particularly useful. When I acquired the Suzuki GS650G and began putting miles on it, I was surprised by a couple of things. First, performance. I had many 650s in my time, BSAs, Triumphs, etc., but none of them performed like this 4-cylinder, double overhead cam Suzuki. Of course, a multiple-cylinder, double overhead cam engine featuring 4 carburetors was going to outperform a 2-cylinder pushrod, overhead valve, 2-carburetor machine. I was not, however, prepared for how great the difference was. The Suzuki is smooth, extremely quiet, starts instantly with a push of a button, and is comparatively vibration-free. To start and sit on an idling Triumph, BSA et al., requires a real man. The vibration from the engine throbbing is felt all the way to your bones. You know you're controlling a fire-breathing beast. The Suzuki, on the other hand, is absolutely civilized. Everything works without manhandling it. The clutch engagement is light and riding is routine. The part I like is when the tack needle swings past 5,000 RPM on the way to its 10,000 RPM red line. It behaves like you push the afterburner button. No overhead valve push rod engine ever behaved like that. The performance of the Suzuki GS650G is awesome. I surprised myself by how much I used the bike after I brought it home. I kind of rediscovered riding, and this riding without working on it stuff was great. In the first 7 weeks I had it, I put on over 2,000 miles. The reliability and performance I was experiencing were what prompted my trip to upstate New York. After returning from New York, I began watching eBay to see if I could find a larger version of the same bike. Suzuki made this model in several different sizes: 650, 750, 850, and 1000. I liked the GS650G so much that I thought I'd really like the 1000 version. The Suzuki performed flawlessly through the entire trip. It cruised willingly at 60, 70, but you knew it was working. It didn't seem to mind and never missed a beat, but it was working. I have no doubt that it would have capably handled a passenger too, if I'd encountered the damsel in distress I mentioned in my writings about the New York trip. Guys always have to be prepared for possibility, and while I knew the 650 would do it, I felt more power would make it even better. Plus, I enjoy the feel of power. Motorcycling isn't really about being practical, it's about passion and how it feels. While going through eBay ads, I came across a very special bike, a Suzuki GSX1100G. I fell in love with it right away, actually. I didn't even know they made a bike like this. Essentially, it was the awesome 1100 double overhead cam, 4-valve per cylinder engine that comes in their superbike, the GSX-1100. The GSX-R is a crotch rocket and among the fastest motorcycles in the world. As much as I like the crotch rockets to look at and ride occasionally, I don't feel they're practical for touring, perhaps for teenagers. After quickly researching this model on the net, I found it was exactly what I wanted. 100 plus horsepower, shaft drive, normal riding position, even the color was right for me. The more I read about it, the more I wanted it, even if I knew inside that it was out of my reach. The Suzuki GSX1100G is in fact the ultimate high-performance sport touring bike. They only made it from 1991 through 1993. This one was a 1993. I looked at the auction and noticed it was ending in a couple of hours. I'm not an eBay member, so I have to call a friend to bid for me. The bidding was up to $1,200. But of course, everyone waits until the last few minutes to bid. I figured it would go for at least $3,000, which would be way out of my reach. On the other hand, it wouldn't hurt to put in a bid for $1,500. I didn't have that either, but I had a plan on how to pull it off. I called my friend to bid for me and he wasn't home. No harm done. I figured this thing will go for a few grand for sure. I was just dreaming. The next day I checked to see what it sold for. $1,400! I couldn't believe it. I blew it. I could have owned my dream machine and I missed it. I was actually depressed over it. While it was true that I couldn't afford it and the last thing I needed was another motorcycle, still I had access to the money, sort of, and I missed it. It really bothered me. The trip to upstate New York had been such a joy, and the number of miles I put on the 650 since I bought it convinced me that I would do more touring. I was also pleased to note the 650 had more than paid for itself with fuel savings. While the fuel mileage wasn't the reason I bought it, it was a nice bonus to find that the bike had essentially been free. This only works if you use it often, and I do. The following day, I asked my friend John to send this guy an email indicating I would buy the bike if his deal fell through. The seller responded to the email by saying the high bidder had already contacted him and was picking the bike up on Saturday. The bike was located in an eastern suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, and the high bidder was coming from Mississippi. Bummer. I was surprised I couldn't get the bike out of my head. I did some checking to see if I could find another one. I could only find one and the owner wanted $5,690. Many times what I could beg, borrow, or steal. Now I was really depressed. Yes, depressed, even though I kept telling myself this was a stupid reaction over missing out on a good deal on a motorcycle. I had to stop by a local motorcycle shop to pick up an oil filter for the 650. And while I was there, noticed a used 1982 Suzuki GS1100G. It wasn't exactly what I was looking for, chain drive, but I was curious about the price. It wasn't in perfect shape, but it wasn't bad for a 22-year-old bike, similar condition to my 650. $3,800, sir. I was stunned. Yes, it wasn't $1,100, but it was 22 years old and not in perfect condition. I was even more depressed. How could I miss that deal? On Thursday, the following week, I spent the day at Chicagoland Speedway in Joliet, Illinois. The ARCA races were qualifying, and ABC Auto Parts, one of our TV program's underwriters, sponsors the Venturini effort when they come to Chicagoland. I got home about 8:30 in the evening, and I was beat. The motorcycle trip to Joliet, about an hour, a day in the sun, and a ride back. I checked my email as soon as I got home, and there it was. Dear Mr. Wildt, the high bidder on my Suzuki GSX1100G never showed up. Do you still want the bike? I called the included phone number. It seems the seller spent the entire day on Saturday detailing the bike so it would be perfect when the buyer arrived from Mississippi. He never showed or called or emailed. I'll take it, the seller continued. I sent him an email on Sunday to try to find out what happened. I'll take it. Then on Monday, I sent eBay a complaint. I'll take it. He finally called and mentioned something about negotiating the price. I told him it was firm. He indicated that maybe he would be able to pick it up this Saturday. I'll take it. After giving it some thought for a couple of days, he remembered my email. He said, the price is firm, $1,400. Do you still want it? I'm on my way. I only had one question. Do you think it's in good enough shape to ride back to Chicago, or do I have to arrange for a trailer? It's in perfect shape. You can ride it to California if you want to. I'm on my way. I'll probably wake you up tomorrow morning. I'm about 400 miles from Chicago. It will take all night. I'll take it. I'm on my way. As soon as I hung up the phone, I started making calls. There must be somebody who will drive me to Cleveland tonight. Of course, the problem was most people have lives and have to work and have obligations to take care of. I kept calling. I heard a knock on the door. It was Dan, a motorcycle racing friend of mine. Where have you been all day? I need the helmet cam. This guy does a TV show about motorcycle racing and needed a piece of equipment for taping the race he was participating in this weekend. Sure, I'll get it for you. Where are you racing this week? I asked, making conversation as I retrieved the equipment. Nelson Ledges, he responded. Nelson Ledges, I exclaimed. That's in Ohio, isn't it? Yes. Is it near Cleveland? Yes, it's just past Cleveland. I couldn't believe it. I need a ride to just past Cleveland. Can I go with you? Yeah, if you're ready to go. I have to leave now. Cool, cool, cool. Let's go. Just by chance, I still had the money I rounded up when I sent the email saying I wanted the bike and hoping if I had cash in hand, I might be able to muscle my way in. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Dan, my motorcycle racing friend for some 35 years, and I spent the next 7 hours in his pickup truck on the way to Cleveland talking about what I was doing. You know, if the bike is no good, I can't bring you back until after the weekend. Yeah, I know. It's worse than that. I've got 2 shows to shoot this weekend, one Saturday, one on Sunday. I have to return immediately. I don't know how I'm going to get back if this doesn't work out, or the other guy gets there first, or if the address is a vacant lot. We followed the computer-generated map to the address I was given. Nice neighborhood. That was a relief. It was dark when we arrived at 6 a.m., their time. Only one house on the block with lights on. Yep, that's it. I was feeling a little better. I knocked on the door. He was up. His wife had just left for work. Come on out to the garage. I'll show you the bike. He opened the door and I couldn't believe it. It was perfect. I took it for a ride around the block. It wasn't really necessary. The bike was in such great condition and the price was so right. I would have taken it if the engine were locked up. The machine rode as well as it looked. It seemed new, it felt new. I was enchanted. I gave him the money, got the title and the bill of sale. Dan was sound asleep in his truck. I didn't know if I should wake him up to say goodbye or let him sleep. I had to get back to Chicago. Apparently, he heard me start the bike again and crawled out of his truck. That's the bike? Yeah. It's beautiful. It looks brand new. You stole it. I know, I'm getting out of here before this guy comes to his senses. I thanked Dan for the lift and he wished me luck getting home. The bike soon proved to ride as awesome as it looked. The power was unbelievable. As I got used to it, I found it would cruise effortlessly at 75 or 80. Normally, I would avoid the interstate, but I really needed to get back to Chicago quickly. I decided to stay on the interstate as long as I could stand it. Everything about the machine was far superior to the GS650. My friend Cooch characterized the Suzuki GS line as the BMWs of Japanese bikes. If that was true, and I agree, then this was the Rolls-Royce of Japanese bikes, albeit a very, very fast Rolls-Royce. It was obvious this machine was much heavier than the 650. Normally this would turn me off, but touring isn't racing and the additional weight seemed to help make it more stable. With the amount of power on hand, you really couldn't complain about the weight hurting performance. I started running out of adrenaline by about Toledo. I was finding myself falling asleep. Yes, you can fall asleep while riding a motorcycle, particularly on the interstate. I turned off the Ohio Turnpike just west of Toledo. I was going to try to take a nap on the grass somewhere, but in the process of finding my way back to Route 20 west, I got my second wind. Or was it the third or fourth? I proceeded west on Route 20, and once again my theory about staying off the interstates to enjoy the ride and stay interested proved true. The continuously changing scenery kept my mind occupied. Somewhere in the middle of Indiana, I remember the words of Doc Joe, "Toys for Tots, Doctor? You can only expect to do about 150 miles a day on a motorcycle without a windshield." I was at about 300 and fatigue was really taking over. I'd gone through all of my usual fatigue fighting tricks, but I was starting to fade. Even the excitement of the new bike along with the beyond my wildest expectation performance. Even treating myself to running it up through the gears. Even the realization that I still hadn't really hammered it and the performance was taking my breath away. Even focusing my attention on interesting architecture and lovely scenery. Even focusing my attention on pretty girls, both real and imagined. Still, I was fading fast. As I passed through Gary, Indiana on Route 6, I'm pretty sure it was Gary, I considered taking Cicero Avenue or Harlem Avenue North. No, it was rush hour now. That would take forever, and I knew I'd never make it. Best to take the quickest way. I turned north on 394, then jumped on 294 to continue my way home. One thing nice about this bike, you are definitely the boss. The acceleration at any speed in any gear is brutal. Merging with interstate traffic or going around slower moving vehicles only requires the slightest movement of the throttle and the machine changes speed immediately. As a matter of fact, I had to keep reminding myself about the fierce acceleration capability lest I run into the back of cars doing 70 miles per hour when I decide to make my move. I had a couple of near incidents that got my attention. When I arrived at the first toll booth at 163rd Street, I was done. Stick a fork in me, done. I could go no farther. 35 hours without rest. Yeah, I know. I used to do all-nighters when I was a racer too. That was a long time ago. I'm 61 years old now and a heart patient. I kind of thought I was done with all-nighters. Give me a break. I paid the toll and made a right turn into the employee parking lot. I carefully placed the front wheel against the curb, put down the side stand, and got off. It had been getting warmer all day. I took my leather coat off, parked my butt on the curb, placed one foot against my new treasure, lest someone abscond with it while I was sleeping. I lay my torso back on the grass, placed the coat over my face to block out the sun, and went out like a light. "Are you all right, sir? Are you all right, sir?" I pulled the coat off my face. 3 squad cars. "Yes, I'm fine. I'm just totally wiped out." They were cool. 2 of them left almost immediately once they realized I was just resting. The other was interested in the bike. It seems he recently bought a new Harley Sportster. We began chatting. He was the sergeant and genuinely interested in the Suzuki. "Boy, that's beautiful. What year is it?" 1993. "How many miles?" 60,000. "Damn, it looks brand new." "Thanks." "Hey, I'm sorry, go back to sleep. You look beat." "I'm okay. I know I won't be able to go back to sleep. I'm a light sleeper, and once I'm up, I'm up." The 15-minute nap did seem to bring me around. I decided to continue going home. The last leg proved uneventful, and I scolded myself for not stopping earlier for the nap. I actually felt pretty good now. I made it home, 400 miles, in a little over 7 hours. Of course, now I couldn't sleep, so I took a couple of pics.
That's some story, but interesting enough. For a variety of reasons, Bill kept using the 650 Suzuki instead of the 1100 for road trips. One of those reasons was he lacked proper saddlebags and tail pack for the 1100. Let's listen as he explains the problem.
Well, this is it. This is my pride and joy. It was really worth the trip to Cleveland, and what an adventure that was. It's just a remarkable chain of events where everything fell together and it worked perfectly. I actually couldn't believe that it happened. I'm not really a person who believes in fate and things like that, but boy, if I were, I'd say it must have been fate that I got hooked up with this bike. And as a matter of fact, I feel a little bit about this bike. We've talked on Motorsports Unlimited before about all the cars I've had in my life. The only one I'm ever sorry that I got rid of was my 65 Pontiac GTO 2+2 convertible. It was a 4-speed tri-power with the aluminum 8-bolt wheels, 4-speed, I think I said 4-speed car, midnight blue, black interior, Vibrasonic rated, just an exceptional car. Of all the cars I had, that was the only one that I've ever sorry I've gotten rid of, and I feel very much the same way about this bike. It's big and fast and powerful, and yet it's comfortable, and it's a classy piece. It's really a nice piece. Now, it presents a new problem though. As you can see, I don't have any way to carry anything. Now, the idea of touring, of course, is that you're going to carry your clothes with you, and in my case, always a lot of video gear, so I need a lot of places to store things and all that. And when you're faced with a bike like this, which is considered a high-performance touring bike, it's not a crotch rocket, it doesn't have the lay-down position and all that, and it's certainly not a bike along the lines of a Goldwing, a Honda Goldwing or something like that, where it comes with molded-in fiberglass bags and tail trunk and all the rest of it. This is a bike, and it's questionable what naked touring means. People argue about it all the time. Some people say it means no windshield, no saddlebags, no nothing. The only thing you tour with is what you can carry in your pockets. And that's sort of a romantic thing to say and everything, but the fact of the matter is you can't really go very far in a day if you don't have a windshield. So most people will accept the notion that if you're going to do naked touring, no, you don't have full fairings and uppers and lowers and all the rest of it, but you may very well have a windshield and saddlebags, something like that, so that you can carry some of the stuff that you need when you're touring. It's a blurred line of distinction where you go from naked touring to a full touring machine. Anyhow, this is a naked touring bike, and of course I added a windshield to it. I had to add the windshield to it because I do a lot of riding. And yet, as you can see, I don't really have any place to carry anything. And that turned out to be a real problem because this is a very pretty bike and it's got very beautiful lines. Somebody spent a lot of time designing the machine and all that. And you really don't want to just tack stuff on it. I hung the saddlebags on it and didn't really care for the way they looked on this machine, on the more modern machine and all that. And so I started looking around to see what I could do. Well, it turns out Suzuki made a luggage rack for this machine. Now, it was very expensive. It was an option very few people bought because it was very expensive. It was about $300 from the factory. I'm sorry, from the dealer. It was a factory item, but it was a dealer-installed item. It was about $300, and they sold very, very few of them. And they're extremely rare now and extremely hard to find. Lucky me, I have one. Now, this is actually kind of a funny story. Believe it or not, these pieces are so sought after now and so rare that I went after one on eBay, and I couldn't believe it. It finally sold at $615, and believe me, I got caught up in the fever a little bit. It was an absolutely mint, perfect condition unit, like a brand new one, and I bid up higher than I should have, but nowhere near $615. And I can tell you, I've never been so glad I lost a bid in my life. Somehow I got caught up in the fever. It's really, that wasn't worth it to me. Sometime later, and I kept watching, and I participate in a group, in an internet group that's devoted to these machines. And a fellow had one that had been broken once and been welded back together, and I'm a good welder, a certified aircraft welder. I said, it's no problem. If it's broken now, I can still weld it together. In any event, I was able to buy it for significantly less, but still outrageously expensive. Problem is, guess what? It's not much of a luggage rack. You can't really put much on here. As a matter of fact, don't go away. I'm going to put this thing on the bike, and I want you to see what I was up against when I was trying to prepare this bike for touring. Well, as you can see, it's not really much of a luggage rack, as sought after as it is. And I think it's sought after because it's so rare, and it does give a couple of things. Number one, these are really high performance motorcycles, and this is a very serious grab handle that's on the back. It's a heavy casting, heavy aluminum casting, and everything very well made. But a person really could slide right over the top of this thing, a passenger, under fierce acceleration. And this machine really is capable of fierce acceleration. So the one thing that this, in fact, I think that's probably what it's more used for than anything else. The one thing that this thing is an excellent backrest. The passengers always feel much more confident when the backrest is in place. The problem is the luggage rack doesn't give you much room for anything. You really can't put anything back here. I've tried 2 or 3 different bags. I had bags hanging off the end. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you an idea. Don't go away. I want to show you one more thing here before we move on from this. But this obviously didn't really work out well for my touring purposes, but I wanted you to see how hard I tried to make it work. Well, I don't know how obvious it is on camera, but it's clear that this little touring Suzuki touring rack, I guess it is, I guess you could say a sport touring rack, because it certainly isn't much of a touring rack, isn't really practical at all for what I have in mind. This is not a very large tail pack, and these are called tail packs in the back. It's not a very large tail pack, and it only gets about a third or maybe at best half of it supported, and it actually hangs off the back of the rack so much that it could actually tip like this. And as a matter of fact, I've already tried it this way on the street, and people complain to me that they can't see the brake light. So that didn't work out very well. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can take this off here. So the rack part of it is really way too short to really support anything, and I actually tried. I made an aluminum plate to have the support come out farther, but it just really wasn't practical. It wasn't designed for it. It's really a sport touring piece, more for appearance and more for a backrest than anything else. And Suzuki actually went through a lot of trouble. If I can take the bags off again. And by the way, I didn't really like the way the bags looked on there. The soft bags, the way they looked on there, just didn't match the lines of the bike. But I can see that some designer at Suzuki went through an awful lot of trouble. If you notice the way the casting is, and again, I'm not sure if it's apparent on camera or not, but the actual, where the blend lines of the casting are and all that, fit the body lines of the machine perfectly. So it's a very attractive unit. It fits the machine perfectly. It's just not very practical for touring purposes. So this obviously wasn't going to be my answer either. Oh, by the way, I think on the previous piece when I was talking about my Pontiac, I said GTO, and of course I misspoke there. It was a Pontiac 2+2 Catalina, not a GTO. So if I misspoke, I think I did. If I misspoke, I meant to say 2+2 Catalina. But in any event, I missed my 2+2 Catalina. I'm sure not going to let go of this one, so I ended up missing this one too. But in any event, this then wasn't the answer either, and I had to keep looking for a solution.
It's obvious the original Suzuki GSX1100G optional rack is too small to be useful for touring, so Bill sought an alternative.
After some considerable searching on eBay, I finally found something that I thought would be appropriate for what I was trying to do. Now, this isn't exactly easy. You have to remember, these motors have the Suzuki GSX1100G. The G on the end of all the Suzuki letters always means that it's a shaft drive bike. Once again, a touring machine. Finding something for machines that haven't been made in 13, 14 years isn't easy. I found a rack that is really just about perfect. It's about double the size of the Suzuki rack, which is more, I think, more of a stylized sport kind of a thing, more of a backrest than a rack. This is made by Rentec, and once again, they don't make them anymore because the machine has been discontinued for so long. But I found one on eBay, and it kind of fit my needs perfectly. And I tried putting that tail pack on here, and I didn't like it at all. That tail pack is really made to be put behind a sissy bar or some kind of a loop up here like that, which this one obviously doesn't have. So I didn't like that solution to the problem at all. I felt I'd made good progress on converting this thing into what I considered a touring or a naked touring bike. But I still wasn't there yet. I really need all the space that I can get. I need saddlebags, I really need a tail pack or a trunk, and I also need the tank bag. I need all the space I can get because all the video gear that I have to carry when I go on these motorcycle road trips, so I can tape the pieces and bring the shows back to you and share it with you. But I felt I made good progress in it. Now, by the way, boy am I filthy doing this, even though I've got all the parts arranged ahead of time and all that, and I think I'm all ready. This is taking a lot longer than I thought it would, and I'm running out of daylight here for today. But so far, this is where we are now. I've got a rack in the back of this machine, and now I have to find something that I can put my stuff in.
Having found a rack that suited his needs, the next step was to find something to put on it to hold his stuff.
Of course, when it comes to finding places to put things on a touring machine, the Honda Goldwing is kind of the gold standard of touring bikes, and even the Harley guys will admit that, and it's been that way for about 30 years now. There's lots of jokes about the Goldwings. This is Don French's Goldwing. It's a particularly special unit. I believe it's 1986. It's fuel injected. It was one of the very, very first fuel injected bikes, and they only had it fuel injected for a little while and discontinued it until several decades later. Anyhow, I believe they're fuel injected now. I'm not sure. They're 6-cylinder now. They're bigger now and all that. But this is still a pretty big bike. And the idea here is when you want to go to pure touring, I wanted to give you an idea of contrasting it. I'm working with a naked touring bike. This is a full touring bike. If mine is a naked touring bike, this one is a formally dressed touring bike. And what it really gives you is it gives you everything. It gives you space. You've got these huge hard bags on both sides and the big hard trunk in the back. It's almost like opening a car trunk. There's plenty of room for it. There's a couple of minuses on this, in my opinion, though. And that is, number one, you can't take these bags off and take them into the motel room at night. And of course, what I do with my videotaping and all that, I want all my stuff going into the motel at night when I go into the motel. So that's the downside. And I talked to Don French about it. I said, this is his bike. And he said, well, what they've got is that they've got actually bags that fit right inside of these bags. And the way you're supposed to do it is to put your stuff inside the cloth bags and put them inside the hard bags and then take the cloth bags out when you go in it. I'm sure I wouldn't do all that. I know I wouldn't do all that. So that's sort of a negative on this design. By the way, as long as I've got the Goldwing out here, one other thing that I wanted to show you, we talked about earlier about the difference between, why would I say mine is a naked tourer, even though it's got a windshield, and this one is a full dress tourer. It also has a windshield. Well, the difference is, yes, it has a windshield, but this thing has a full fairing in here, and it's got glove compartments, and it's got lowers. That's the units down here that protect your legs and the lower part of your body from the elements and all that. That's quite different than just having a simple windshield that you tuck your face and your chest behind. So this would be the formal full touring thing. Mine would be the naked tourer. And what I'm trying to find is something in between, and I'm leaning towards the hard bags. I don't have any experience with hard bags, as I've said on the program several times during the motorcycle road trips. I'd like to get some experience, so that's what I was leaning for. The problem is, how do you do it? Now, there's a company in Italy called Giva, and I hope I'm saying that right. To my Italian friends, if I didn't say it right, I'm sorry. It's Givi. It sounds like it ought to be Givi, but everybody says Giva, so it's Giva, I guess. And they make a really nice hard bag system, which consists of a trunk and two what they call side cases, and they're quick removable. They've got a whole rack system and all that sort of thing. It's very, very cool. Everything is weather tight and weather sealed. Problem is, about $1,000, maybe a little bit more by the time you get done. That's way out of my range. When I paid $1,400 for the bike, I sure don't want to pay $1,000 for bags. And the second part of it is you really have to leave the rack on all the time. Even when you don't use this, if you're just going to ride with just the trunk, the rack is kind of an integral part of the whole deal. So all of that has to stay on the bike, even if you've got the side cases on or not. Anyway, it's a cool setup, no doubt about it. It sounds like I'm knocking it or something. I'm really not. It's a cool setup, very popular. Everybody likes them. Way out of reach for me, but this is what I've all got running around in my mind when I'm trying to figure out how to get something appropriate on the GSX1100G so I can use that bike for the next motorcycle road trip I take you on.
It was about this time in the process that, quite by chance, we covered the J.C. Whitney car show. Bill had to go through the warehouse to find Toby, J.C. Whitney's outlet store manager, when he spotted the J.C. Whitney trunk featured in the piece we showed you earlier in the show. Of course, to bikers, there is nothing new about the Whitney trunk. They've been around for years and are a common sight in motorcycling. What is new to Bill was what was inside, and what was inside set the wheels in his head in motion. Let's listen as he explains.
Now, as soon as I spotted the case on the shelf in the warehouse, I realized that's just about what I had in mind that I was going to need for my bike. So I grabbed one and I started looking at it. But what really surprised me, there's nothing new about this. I mean, everybody knows about these cases. They've been around for years, and it's perhaps one of the most popular motorcycling accessories going. What surprised me, nobody ever mentioned this part, and this is what I found important. When it comes to that you're going to have to mount these cases, I just kind of assumed they have a couple of like U-hooks, maybe 4 U-hooks, something like that, to hook onto the various carrier racks that are made and all that. What surprised me was this. This was the important part. This was the part that really surprised me, because if you look carefully here, you can see this protrusion up here and these 2 pins down here. And this is what makes this whole deal work. Now, if you hold on one second. I should really plan these things better. The way it works is the pins down here at the bottom, and I'm looking right here, the pins down here at the bottom, these go in here like this, and then this protrusion up here, and I don't know if you can hear this or not, I'm probably doing this way too awkwardly. I'm sorry, I'm banging the mic around. And by the way, it's kind of raining right now. I'm working as quickly as I can. Now, I don't know if you heard the thing snap in, but that snapped in. It's an interface. The plate is actually an interface between the case and the machine, which means that you don't really mount the case, you mount the interface. And that really started my wheels turning. First though, I had to mount the case. All right, I've installed the mounting brackets, and they're really just 4 screws and some little pieces of channel that go across this way, which is crisscrossed to the way the luggage rack bars are, so it's pretty much universal to kind of fit any of the racks. After that's screwed down, again, we've got these very important pins here now, these 2, and this protrusion. Now watch. Again, what I'm doing is I'm lining up, I'm putting those pins in the appropriate slots on the bag, push them forward in it, then push the bag down, and it's locked in position. It's on the bike. It's a good rock solid fixture now and all that. Now, up until now, no story. This is, millions of people have done it, or thousands anyhow, I guess, have done this. I've seen these bags a million times. No story, but the thing that I do find interesting is that nobody ever mentioned that interface, that mounting plate. And the more I thought about it, the more I said, why couldn't you use these trunks as bags on the side? You don't really have to mount the trunk, the case itself. All you have to do is mount the plate. And the more the wheels turn, the more I said, boy, this is a walk in the park and it's going to resolve my issues. So again, what you have to do then, you start making some sketches, you look at the motorcycle. As a matter of fact, hold on, I'll show you what comes next. Now, I'm sure, as most old hot rodders have already guessed, the first thing you have to do is find out a place where you can attach mounting brackets to the frame or whatever. It doesn't make any difference if it's a car or a boat or a snowmobile or what have you. If you're going to attach something to it, you have to find a good solid place to attach it to. So I took off the bodywork in the seat and I took a look, and the forward part of the Rentec rack mounts to, there's a welded in boss here for a fairly good sized bolt, about a 3/8 bolt here. There's also a good heavy mounting bolt for the rear part of the exhaust system here. And then, and what I think is the cleverest part of my work, is that this curved area right underneath this rack, it's part of the rack, has a little flat area just about right, and in fact it turned out to be just about right, to drill and tap a couple of 1032 Allen screws in. So I end up with a mounting point here, a good solid mounting point. This goes to a very solid portion of the frame here. This goes to a good solid portion of the frame, and of course this is a good heavy mounting point here. So I end up with 3 mounting points here, here, and here. After that, of course, you start making up some sketches, start laying out material. I like to work with stainless. It's a material that I'm comfortable with because I'm a heliarc welder, and I like it because it never corrodes and you can polish it and make it look like chrome. Never have any rust problems or anything like that. I like to work with stainless. On the other hand, the downside of stainless, of course, is that it's very hard on the tools. You got to sharpen tool bits all the time and all that, and you do have to be able to heliarc weld in order to weld it. But that's what I like to work with. So taking the material that I had at hand, went to work and started cutting and making brackets so that I could, my first impulse was to put kind of a grid work up here and just use the hardware that came with the bag. And then I started saying to myself, why do I even need all that stuff? If I'm careful about the way I make the brackets, I can eliminate all that and just take the back of the plate, take the plate itself, the what I call the interface, take the interface itself and bolt it right to the bracket if I make the brackets carefully. And that's kind of what I did. Well, this is what I came up with. Essentially, it's 2 brackets on each side that I needed, a big major bracket and a small bracket up here. And again, I used all stainless steel. This bracket is supported here on the rear exhaust system mount. On the forward end of it, and this got a little bit tricky because the first attempt I made at this, I used that boss that I talked about. There's a threaded boss in there for a fairly large, like a 3/8 bolt, except it's metric. I used that, and it worked out just fine as long as I had the body work and the seat off and all that. The problem was, once I put the body work back on and the seat back on, in order to get this bracket off, I had to take the body work and the seat off to do it. And I actually tried it that way because I didn't really want to make it again. And I found out fairly quickly that if it's not easy for me to get off, I'm not going to take it off. And I ride around with the bracket on all the time. And that's one of the objectives of this, is I want the machine to be pretty much stock in appearance when I'm not using the bags. That was part of the objective. So I didn't want these big mounting plates or the brackets to be on the machine when I'm not using it. So I wanted it to be easy. So I had to fabricate these extra brackets here. Their purpose essentially is just to drop down this mounting point here to where it's underneath this frame tube, because now I can get at, these are stainless Allen bolts, now I can get at these stainless Allen bolts from the side here and take these brackets off without removing the bodywork of this. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but trust me, it was worth the extra effort. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. I know me. And then the rear mounting bracket here, which is essentially an L-shaped bracket made out of stainless again and held on with stainless Allen bolts. Again, the reason I like the stainless is that we don't, motorcycles get rained on and all that, and you don't want to deal with the rust and the rust kind of dribbling down and everything. Stainless is wonderful for that. It's decorative, it's nice, and it doesn't corrode. So I like all that. So this is essentially what I came up with finally, to meet the objectives of, number one, to be a good solid support so that I can use these trunks, because they are trunks, and I'm going to get to that. They are trunks, but so that I can use them as side cases in a system. I guess you could say a saddlebag trunk system. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the interface, if this doesn't make sense yet to people now that I think of it. This is the interface, and again, I'm not using that extra hardware that I got with it because I was careful about how I designed and fabricated these pieces so that I can bolt this directly onto here, and now I've got my interface. Now I'll show you what I mean. One thing I should mention very quickly, I can't believe we're running out of time. I always think this is going to be real easy and real simple to explain, and this kind of technical stuff always takes longer than I think it should. One problem that I ran into that turned out to be more of a headache than I would have imagined was that the stock turn signals absolutely flat would not fit. And I'll show you what I mean. The stock turn signals come out right about here. And I don't know whether you can see the perspective on camera or not, but these are 4 or 5 inches in the way. It's not a half-inch miss or anything like that. And I came up with a variety of solutions, whether to build a light bar, to have it come back here or something like that, to get out of the way. I could have made life a lot easier on myself. They actually have a smaller set of these, but it doesn't use the same, it's the same mounting plate, it's just a smaller size, so you can't like interchange them, which I might have considered it if I could have just interchanged the bags back and forth however I wanted to do it, but I would have had to commit to one or the other. If I'd used the smaller bags, it would have moved it forward considerably so that the person's leg, and the idea is of course the person's leg has to be forward of the bag and not interfere with it, and then the back of the, I keep calling it a bag, it's a trunk, but for purpose of this, the bag would have been inside of the taillight then. Would have saved myself a ton of work, but I just couldn't bring myself to go to the smaller bag because, again, space is always a problem when I'm doing these road trips, and I want all the space that I can get, so I want to go with the big bag. So what I found was these little LED turn signals, and this bothered me because I want the bike to be absolutely stock. So I went through a bunch of effort making sure that I had quick connects on the stock turn signals so that when I take these brackets off, I can change the turn signals back. And as it turns out, I really like how bright those little LED turn signals are and all that, and they're very crisp in the way they pop on. I think they're more noticeable. So actually, well, go figure. I like them better, so I'm gonna actually leave them on. But in any event, that was a major problem that I ran into was space with the turn signals, and it came out a little differently than I thought. But I'm really real pleased with it anyway. We're almost done, I promise, but I wanted to show you how nice the brackets come off, which was real important to me to make sure that the machine looked nice and clean when I didn't use the bag. What we end up with is 2 1/4-inch stainless Allen bolts here and 2 1032 stainless Allen bolts back there, and the bolt that holds the exhaust system on here, and here's how it works.
That really is pretty slick if you can do your own work. And speaking of work, let's see how it works.
Well, before I show you how it works, let me give you my idea of a disclaimer. I really shouldn't have to say this to a motorsport audience. After all, we're the people who put Cadillac engines in Volkswagens. Using things in ways other than the way engineers and designers intended is what we do. It's what we enjoy. But let me get this out of the way. This is a motorcycle trunk, not a saddlebag. It was engineered, designed, and sold to be used as a trunk. What I'm doing is using it in a way that wasn't intended. I think it's a great idea with lots of possibilities, but I want to emphasize you have to be able to do your own work, and there may be some unforeseen challenges when actually used. If you're going to try something like this, remember, you're on your own. The real test will be a road trip, and I'll report back after I do that. Right now I'm happy. So far, everything seems to work the way I envisioned. Let's take a look. Let's assume I'm on the road and just came down from my hotel room ready to load up and hit the road.
They really are cool, and I've ridden with Bill many times, and the passenger doesn't even know they're there. A road trip would be a real test, though. Now, before we finish, let's check out some other applications Bill thought of while working on this project.
T-Roadsters, the hot rodding group, that's another group that has problems with storage because the vehicles are so small, particularly the T-Roadsters. A lot of people think that they can put their luggage and things back here, and most of them have these little pickup beds. What people don't realize is that all that's back here is a fuel tank and a battery. There's no other room. There's no room to carry anything. Very much like on a motorcycle, same problem. Once again, remember, with these bags, the beauty of this is you're not mounting the bags. It's the plate that gets mounted. As a matter of fact, if you're a sharp person, and I've looked at this a couple times, I can actually make these, and you don't have to really make a whole plate. You just make this tab and this, and you could actually weld them to the top of whatever you're working with, or make a custom cover and everything that has these kind of protrusions. And what you end up with, and I think this is pretty cool, hold on. Voila! end up with weatherproof sealed storage compartments that are one button removable. Push the button, take it off to go into the motel room at night. Very much like motorcycles. I think for T-Roadsters, this is a great application for something like this. Just an idea. And how about snowmobiles? Remember, you only mount the plate, perhaps one like this, or, and I've already measured this, one on each side, and the overall width is not greater than the ski width. Once again, another idea. What about boats? Not what they were made for, not what they were designed for, but I know I can make them work, and I'm going to test it next summer.
Pretty cool idea with lots of possibilities. And Janine was right earlier when she said this was more than just for bikers. I hope the car guys stayed with us and we got some wheels turning. As always, we're out of time too soon with only enough left to acknowledge the fine work of our award-winning production team, including Tom McGrady, Art Lauschat, our webmaster, Frank Barbalace, and Sue Casanda. Special thanks to JBTV's Jerry Bryant. Music is created for us by independent artists Roger Pauley and Jerry Herbert. Of course, we have to take a moment to thank the stars of this edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Janine Lauschat, May Chin, and our host, Bill Wildt. Me, I'm Samantha Bentley, taking just a moment to say I hope Bill's back is well enough for him to take his sort of annual motorcycle road trip this year. That will be the real test of these hard bags. Of course, he always tapes these trips, so you'll learn right along with us. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
This program made possible in part by support from Copy That, located in the County Farm Plaza at County Farm Road and Army Trail Road in Carroll Stream, Illinois. This program made possible in part by support from PB Food Products, located on 47th Street at Western Avenue in Chicago, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from J.C. Whitney & Company, located just off I-80 at the Utica exit in LaSalle, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Jimmy's Red Hots, located on Grant Avenue and Pulaski Road in Chicago.
Motorsports Unlimited is produced by Bill Wildt, president of the Motorsport Advancement Crusade.
This program made possible in part by support from the Chicagoland Toys for Tots Motorcycle Parade held on Western Avenue in Chicago, the first Sunday in December.
This program made possible in part by support from Midwest Muscle Car Parts, located on Joliet Road and 47th Street in Lyons, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from ABC Auto Parts, located on Ashland Avenue at 138th Street in Blue Island, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Bridgestone Firestone and your local Bridgestone Firestone tire retailers.
Motorsports Unlimited was created to raise public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation of the motorsport community and their activities. You can contact us by email at msutv.com, or you can write to Motorsport, P.O. Box 66242, Chicago, Illinois, 60666. We enjoy hearing from our audience. Please let us know what you think.
Next week on Motorsports Unlimited, it's the history of the Corvair. Join us with Larry Claypool as he explains next week on Motorsports Unlimited.
So that's it, another edition of Motorsports Unlimited and the lovely ladies of motorsports. And be with us next week because we'll have something real exciting. Bill Wildt's going to have the lovely ladies, and just about anything can happen right here on Motorsports Unlimited. Every week at this time, we bring you the best in motorsports. So be seeing ya. Bye-bye. And keep on rocking.